So just be clear, Evergrande is one of a number of big property companies in China. 30 to 35% of the total activity in China is relating specifically to property construction and investment. And interestingly, a lot of people in China have over the last few years acquired multiple properties, but their rate of acquisition has dropped significantly. The value of property has fallen. The ability for those large construction companies to get finance is very, very weak compared to where it was. And so they've found it difficult to support the bondholders and all of those things. Now, China has done a whole bunch of stuff to try and support the property sector directly and indirectly. They've taken some of the interest rates down. They've redefined what a first-time buyer is and what an investment owner is so that they can try and get more people to buy. But the bottom line is there's less demand than there has been for a long, long time for property in China. And that's a big issue. Now, if that plays out the way that I think it will, what that means is that the momentum from China, which has been a very significant economic driver around the world, will get weaker. And that, of course, hits Australia particularly strongly because of our relationship with China. Less demand, for example, some of the iron ore products. But also, it's having a direct impact in Australia. So already some of the Chinese builders who were very active in Australia have started to withdraw from Australia. And so that's partly because of what's happening in China, but also what's happening in Australia. So there is a significant downward pressure on property, not just in China, but around the world because of what's happening in China. Plus, of course, higher interest rates and the other things that are going on. So net, this to me is different this time. But, banks will argue that there's nothing to see here. And many governments around the world will try and do whatever they can to try and property markets, because, of course, if the property market slides, that creates huge downward pressure in terms of financial stability and indeed wealth as well. So we're going to see a tussle between governments trying to support property and some of those economic drivers triggered perhaps by what's happening in China coming through. But just be clear, there are two types of investors in Evergrande and the other big property companies. Local Chinese investors, and then the international bondholders. Now, what's actually happened to date is that it's the local investors in China that have been supported by the Chinese government. The international bondholders less so. And so if you look at it more broadly, overall international investment in China has started to drop relatively recently. Everyone argued for a long time, while China is growing, we need to have a significant exposure to China. That's now turning around. So we've actually got less investment in China than previously. So I have a feeling that some of the most significant negative impacts won't be on the local investors or property holders in China, but it'll be on the international investors. And that includes a lot of the big banks and a lot of the big property companies. So that's why I think it's different this time.